Ultra-processed foods, often marketed for convenience and flavor, represent one of the most significant yet underappreciated threats to liver health in modern diets. These items, which include packaged snacks, ready-to-eat meals, breakfast cereals, and sweetened treats, are engineered to maximize taste, texture, and shelf life, often through the addition of refined sugars, trans fats, emulsifiers, artificial flavors, and preservatives. While these foods may provide calories, the metabolic consequences of consuming them are far more harmful than those of equivalent calories from whole foods. The liver, tasked with processing nutrients, metabolizing toxins, and regulating energy balance, bears the brunt of the stress caused by the chemical complexity and rapid digestibility of ultra-processed foods. One of the most concerning mechanisms involves the gut-liver axis. Emulsifiers, common in processed snacks to improve texture and shelf stability, disrupt the gut microbiota, reducing populations of beneficial bacteria and increasing intestinal permeability. This leaky gut allows bacterial endotoxins, such as lipopolysaccharides, to enter the portal circulation and reach the liver directly. Once there, these endotoxins trigger inflammatory signaling pathways in hepatocytes, activating Kupffer cells and stellate cells, which initiate fat accumulation, oxidative stress, and early fibrotic processes. Chronic exposure to these compounds can silently drive non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, NEFLD, and set the stage for progressive liver injury, even in the absence of overt obesity. Trans fats, another staple of ultra-processed foods, exacerbate hepatic risk. They interfere with lipid metabolism by promoting the accumulation of triglycerides and low-density lipoprotein cholesterol in the liver while reducing the capacity for fatty acid oxidation. Over time, this imbalance leads to hepatic steatosis, inflammation, and cellular stress. Combined with refined sugars, which flood the liver with fructose and glucose in easily absorbed forms, trans fats accelerate de novo lipogenesis, pushing the liver into a continuous state of fat accumulation and oxidative burden. Unlike calories from whole foods, which are accompanied by fiber, micronutrients, and antioxidants that help regulate absorption and metabolic impact, the calories from ultra-processed foods act almost exclusively as a direct metabolic insult. Artificial sweeteners, often included in processed foods marketed as diet-friendly, present another hidden danger. By altering the gut microbiome and impairing glucose tolerance, these compounds can induce subtle insulin resistance and metabolic dysregulation. When combined with refined carbohydrates and fats, the liver is forced to manage repeated spikes in insulin and triglycerides, further promoting hepatic fat accumulation and inflammatory signaling. Over months and years, the cumulative effect is a liver under constant chemical and metabolic stress, quietly accumulating fat and losing its capacity to handle additional metabolic or toxic challenges. The risks are particularly pronounced in children and adolescents, who are increasingly consuming ultra-processed foods as staples rather than occasional treats. Early exposure to emulsifiers, trans fats, and added sugars can reprogram metabolic pathways, promoting insulin resistance, visceral adiposity, and early fat deposition in the liver. Once these pathways are established, the trajectory toward NEFLD and other metabolic disorders is difficult to reverse, even with dietary intervention later in life. Beyond individual metabolism, ultra-processed foods create systemic effects that amplify liver risk. Chronic low-grade inflammation, oxidative stress, and impaired lipid handling contribute not only to NAFLD, but also to insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, dyslipidemia, and cardiovascular disease. Because these metabolic disturbances often develop silently, habitual consumption of processed foods may appear harmless in the short term, while the liver and broader metabolic system are deteriorating steadily in the background. Practical strategies to mitigate these risks are clear: minimizing intake of ultra-processed foods, reading ingredient labels carefully, and prioritizing whole, minimally processed foods. Whole foods provide a complex matrix of fiber, protein, micronutrients, and phytonutrients that slow carbohydrate absorption, reduce postprandial insulin spikes, and supply antioxidant protection to liver cells. In contrast, ultra-processed foods deliver a concentrated, rapidly absorbed metabolic burden devoid of protective compounds, creating conditions that favor fat accumulation, inflammation, and long-term hepatic dysfunction. In summary, calories from ultra-processed foods are not metabolically equivalent to those from whole foods. Beyond mere weight gain, These foods actively stress the liver through chemical additives, trans fats, refined sugars, and gut microbiome disruption. Habitual consumption silently promotes fat deposition, oxidative stress, and inflammatory signaling in hepatocytes, laying the groundwork for NAFLD, fibrosis, and systemic metabolic disorders. Awareness and restraint are essential. The liver may tolerate occasional indulgences, but repeated exposure to ultra-processed foods is a slow, insidious path to chronic metabolic disease and hepatic decline.